tonight's hobby enhancement is some kind of spiffy tea. Right, tonight it's terrain building time. Now I've been getting into the Victory at Sea again and also the Black Seas, and I've got a lovely vinyl sea mat that's doing the job well, but I don't have much in the way of other terrain. So I've basically just been getting some hills that normally sit on a textured games table and plonking them down in the middle of the sea mat and going, well, that's an island, that'll do. But it's getting a bit dull and it's just not up to scratch. So I've decided to try and make a few different series of terrain for 2 different games. And to keep it simple, I've decided to start with Victory at Sea terrain for the Pacific. So I got this bright idea that I'll try and do some atolls to start with. They seem like a low bar to try and clear for the first one. But rather than just going and making them all out of foam core and texture, I thought I'd get clever in the way that it might not actually work. And I went and looked up some pictures, some satellite pictures of atolls from the Pacific, and I got them printed out on 200 GSM paper. What I'm going to do is I'm going to cut them out with a bit of a margin around the edge for the to show where it's too shallow for ships to go, and I'm going to glue them onto this 1000 GSM hardboard got from a local office supply store, and then I'm going to use Woodland Scenics. I just happen to have this lying around that I never got around to using. And what I'll do is I'll get some of this clear glue, and I'm going to glue on these sections of grass on these to raise it up and give it some texture. Now it won't need a lot of height, but when you're looking at the scale of this, right? I sat down and worked out the ground scale for Victory at Sea. The horizon is supposedly 30 inches in Victory at Sea. Now, how far the horizon is away depends a bit on how high you are from sea level. If you're standing 6 foot tall, I think it's 4 miles. If you're actually in a ship, then allegedly you can see another ship from 12 nautical miles away. That's about 20 kilometers. So, when you get the rulers out, these won't be exactly to scale, but they're probably about right. And this page is 12 inches tall, so the object in it, the picture in it, they're about 6 to 9 inches. Well, there's an auspicious number, 6 to 9 inches long. Here's a few more pretty pictures of these things, so about 10 inches across there. That's probably about the right size. These atolls tend to be 5 to 10 kilometers from side to side, depending. And I won't be exactly correct, but it'll be close enough. So most of these, this is going to be a bit of an experiment. I'm going to muck around with some little brushes, different sizes, just to put the right amount of green in the right places. And I'm hoping it doesn't look too weird. I'm hoping the picture and the actual scenics don't look too awkward going together. Because if they do, what I've then got to do is sculpt the hills out of foam. And in fact, this one I probably will need to do that anyway, just to give this central volcano mountain some height. And then I'd have to build up the land bits and just keep the pretty picture for the water section in the middle of the atoll. Maybe that might work. It's a funny thing, if you're using different mediums, it looks less realistic, even if one of the mediums is literally a realistic photo. So this is going to be a bit of an experiment to see whether this approach works. And the reason I'm doing it this way is because the atolls are so low, they're only a couple of meters above sea level, well, at high tide anyway, they really don't need to have, you know, a couple of inches worth of height to reflect them. They're only going to need a few mil, if that, and that'll mostly be covered by this stuff. So I'm just going to have to experiment with how granular I get with the flock and or clump foliage. I've got some thoughts on how to represent these in the game, because, you know, some of these, like you know, this one here, all of the green bits there will quite clearly block line of sight to a Victory at Sea ship. Whereas something like this, really only the green bit is going to block line of sight. So I'm going to treat it as anything clump foliage blocks line of sight, and anything else just blocks movement. That's my best guess at the moment anyway. I'm sure my gaming buddies will have opinions on that. So first thing to do is to cut these bits out and glue them to the hard board, and hope like hell it doesn't warp too much, because I have my doubts about this, but I don't really want to have to go and cut MDF if I can avoid it. Okay, so now with the magic of television. Right, a couple of notes. I used 200 GSM paper, which I've used before, and I took the files to a commercial printer, it's a local stationery shop, so that I could use a printer that had much better resolution than when I get on mine and get more of a photo finish. And interestingly, the 200 GSM paper they use has a satin finish to it, whereas the stuff you buy in packs of 250 that I feed through my inkjet at home, it's not quite as satin in its finish, it's more of a matte finish. So I'm hoping that the combination of the satin, sort of satin finish on the 1000 GSM hardboard and the 200 GSM paper will stand up to a thin veneer of this stuff without getting all weird and bubbly or warping too much. I have managed to fit all of them on the one A2 piece, more or less. A bit of jiggery pokery here. I might clip a bit later, doesn't matter if I do. Now some of these have got higher resolution than others, so the resolution on this, it's pretty good. Whereas the resolution on some of them, this one for example, a bit granular. Now there's actually towns on these. These are named islands usually. I can't remember which one's which. But I'll probably cover those with, I'll have a look. I might cover them with clump foliage, because this is meant to be World War II and they wouldn't have been as developed up those islands. So the trick now is to glue it all on in and hope that I don't stuff up my very careful arrangement of trying to get all 8 of the damn things on one sheet of card. Right, well, the glue worked well enough in terms of drying and forming a pretty strong bond, but it did warp the card quite a bit. I'm hoping that I'll be able to remedy that. It might be easier to remedy it once I've got the pieces cut out, so we'll try that. Okay, so this is the first one cut out. I did manage to get rid of the worst of the warping. There's a bit left. It's not too bad on this side actually. Truth be told, there's always going to be a bit of imperfection in the, that's the worst spot. There's always going to be a bit of imperfection in the mat that it's sitting on, so it's never going to be entirely flat. What I'm going to do is put some black marker, if that doesn't work, some paint around the edge of the base, and then that'll hopefully help it blend into the table as well. And here it is again with the edges in black, which is an improvement. But I have noticed that the, here we go, here's a good shot of it, The material comes in basically layers, mostly 2 layers, probably a 500 GSM glued together. And the process of flattening it has caused a bit of a peel. So I may have to go over these actually with paint instead of with a black marker, just in order to get in there and paint through the gap in the laminate. That will conceal the gaps even more. But you know, I'm told, I think the basic idea is sound. Probably looking at it this sort of angle off of a table. What I'll try next, once I've cut out a few more of these things, is the flock, and see if that's a good look, or if it's with the clump foliage that I'm planning on using. Looks weird next to the sand and the photograph of the water. So I finished cutting out the remaining islands, and they've all got warping to some extent. It's going to require some treatment. The basic trick is to spray the back with water or spray paint. That will reverse the warping. But then I realized I've got to put sand and clump foliage onto it, which is going to create warping again. So what I'm going to do is road test a couple of them with the sand and clump foliage. Then once that's dried, spray the back, and if that works, then I'll do it for the rest. If there's problems with that, I might try spraying them to get them flat in the first place, and then maybe pin them down with clamps or something to maintain their flatness when I apply the clump foliage and sand on the remaining ones. So I'm going to road test the sand on a couple of the islands that have the poorest resolution in the photographs. That way it's not such a big deal if I stuff them up. Okay, the next stage. So here's the sand glued on, and I've just roughly followed where the sand is on the actual photograph to put real sand on there. And so far so good. And then here's one where I've put clump foliage on it. And a lot of this will come off, and I don't know if the glue I used is the best stuff. These are test pieces. I may end up mucking up one of the or two of these completely while I experiment with different glues and find out how well they hold, and whether I've got to, water down some wood glue and dab it in there or whatever the hell. You can see the extent of the warping problem. That's the other thing, is when I spray these things on the other side and hopefully de-warp them, it might not work. So we'll just try the first couple. If the spray de-warping doesn't work, we'll have to look at maybe de-warping the boards before we put the clump foliage and sand on them, and then finding a way to pin them flat while we glue the top surfaces on, which I think I can do, but that'll be a bit of a job. In the meantime, it's turning out okay, I think. I mean, it's always going to look a bit less photo perfect and a bit more, garage hobbyist 3D terrain made, but that's all right. So are the miniatures, so it should fit reasonably well. And here we have the finished lot, all 8 that I've bothered to do. As you can see, the clump foliage is more or less glued. Some of it keeps falling off, so there'll be some touching up as we go along. I finished painting the edges in black. I ended up doing that with paint. Quick note with this, if I'd done it again, I'll probably use 500 GSM card instead of 1000. What I'm finding is whenever I try to bend the card flat, it starts peeling away like this. So there will be a few bits where I have to maybe glue it together and press it down or something. I'll see how I go. But by and large, it's worked. The warping issue was mostly resolved by gluing paper, just normal 80 GSM paper, to the back of each of these islands. Bubbles up a little bit, but that's okay. And look, they don't sit 100% flat. I've got to bend them back every once in a while, but then the table's never 100% flat either. So for most gaming purposes, it works just fine. It does occur to me that I could have done the same sort of islands just with, you know, sand and clump foliage, but the one thing which the pictures has given me, aside from realistic shapes, is this lovely mixture of texture of the ocean and the lagoons inside of each atoll, which combined with the clump foliage worked a bit better than I was afraid that it might. But what I'll probably do for gaming purposes is that ships and torpedoes cannot cross the edge of the base. Gunshot can clear the edge of the base, but anywhere where there's foliage is assumed to be tall enough terrain that the ships can't see over the top of it. And somebody will probably argue that they can drive their PT boats, their torpedo boats, into the lagoons. We'll have to think about that later. Not that that'll help them much. So that's it, that's the terrain. Some thoughts on having finished the process. Cutting out 1000 GSM card is such a pain in the ass. It's a bit excessively masochistic, and given that the card tends to warp a little bit anyway, it may be worth just using 500 GSM card if you're going to do this yourself, because you do end up gluing a 200 GSM sheet on top and then probably an 80 GSM sheet underneath. Alternatively, if you have power tools, then cutting the stuff out of daswood may work. You'll probably still have warping problems, but they won't be as bad, particularly once you glue the back side of it. I used card because I do most of my hobby work after the wife and son have both gone to bed, and they're not going to like me using a jigsaw at 9 o'clock at night. So quietly swearing to myself in the other room with a craft knife is another matter. I think they look the part. They've done what I want them to do. It was an experimental terrain. I've never made anything quite like this before, not made any naval terrain before. With lighter card it would have been a lot less painful, and it's actually a pretty easy thing to do if you use basic light card. But job's done. I'll hopefully get a game in with these soon, possibly with the Japanese against some Italians. We'll see how we go. If nothing else, it looks pretty. Anyway, thanks for watching. Feel free to like, subscribe, tell your friends, comment. Maybe there's an easier way of going about this that I didn't think of. Let us know. But for now, it's time to call it a day.